America's streets, an arms race involving crime guns and literally ghost guns. The reason they're known as ghost guns is they are undetectable and untraceable. This proposed law, the Untraceable Gun Safety Law of 2018, will require that guns be traceable. It will ban guns that are untraceable, undetectable, ghost guns, 3D designs that can lead only to increasing death and fatalities and injuries on our streets. So this crisis really is of the Trump administration's making. And I'm going to give the president the benefit of the doubt. He didn't know about it. Blame it on Jeff Sessions. It was Attorney General Sessions' fault. If he knew that Attorney General Sessions was going to settle this case, he never would have hired him. He can simply attribute it to a misjudgment on the part of the Department of Justice, and Secretary Pompeo can be a hero here. He can respond to my colleague, Senator Markey, that he's heard him, he's heeded his advice, and now they are going to, in fact, ban these ghost guns. Otherwise, let me just reach across here. Coming to a theater near you, coming to a theater near you, coming to a school near you, coming to a sports stadium, to any public place. These ghost guns are the new wave of American gun violence. You will see them around our streets, in our airports, our train stations. They are undetectable, untraceable. Forget about the TSA guarding the plane that you board. These ghost guns are a menace. The failure to ban them will mean blood on the hands of officials who have that responsibility. I call on the Trump administration now to do the right thing, but we're going to pursue this legislation. We're going to fight for it, and I hope, sincerely, our Republican colleagues are going to join us. There should be nothing partisan about this measure. Gun dealers, the NRA, please join us in this effort. Thank you.
And as the leader comes up, I just want to point out, you remember Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut, and of course most recently in my state, the Parkland shooting. And as a result of that, some of the action that's being taken is to harden schools. That won't do a bit of good if you allow these plastic guns to be manufactured. And who better knows that other than our leader than all these moms here. So thank you for coming and joining us today.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank Senators Nelson, Markey, and Blumenthal, Senator Menendez as well, for their great work here. So first, this didn't happen by accident. The Trump administration, pushed by the gun activists, did this. For 7 years, this was not allowed. When these came about, these 3D printers, and you could make guns with them, in 2010, there was an international agreement saying we're not going to allow them on the internet. We're going to do everything we can to stop them. And that was abided by for 7 years until now. So the Trump administration is responsible for this, no one else. It's not an accident. It wasn't something that sort of fell through the cracks. They always respond to the gun activists, no matter how much it puts America's safety at risk. Starting tomorrow, as you know, you'll just need a little money and download a blueprint to make a gun at home undetectable by metal detectors. Already the damage has been done. According to the New York Post, already more than 1,000 people have downloaded plans to make AR-style 3D printed guns, and the ban hasn't been lifted yet. The idea of these print-on-command ghost guns is every bit as scary as it sounds. We should be doing everything in our power to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, President Trump tweeted about this morning. It's $1 short and a day late. Where the heck has he been? And this idea that he'll look into it, we've been down that rabbit hole before. Remember bum stocks? There was a big issue. NRA said, sure, let's look into it. We've had no action. On issue after issue, the Trump administration's MO when there's a crisis is to say, we'll look into it, working with the NRA, and then nothing happens. Sure as we're here today, nothing is going to happen from this administration. We're going to have to pass legislation because they are just enslaved by the NRA. When the NRA says jump, they say how high. And the fact that the president said, the first time this comes about, he tweets about it, he says, I'm going to consult with the NRA. That shakes every American's confidence that he really wants to do something. So make no mistake about it. This is the doing of the Trump administration. This is part of a long pattern of letting the gun lobby get whatever they want, even if safety is at risk, even if terrorists could gain the upper hand. He complains about terrorists crossing the border, but he wants to let them have guns undetected? What kind of hypocrisy is this? What kind of hypocrisy is this? The president's tweet this morning gets to the basic incompetence of his administration. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It has real and important consequences for the American people. And that the administration's erratic governing style, their fear and obeisance to the gun lobby, is exactly why it's incumbent on we in Congress to do everything to stop these websites before the damage by a mass shooter or a terrorist occurs. And now let me introduce another one of my colleagues who's been a leader in this effort to stop gun violence. Everyone up here has been a leader. I'm so proud of Senator Nelson taking the lead after Parkland in Florida, and Senators Markey and Blumenthal, all who have experienced horrors in their states. And no one's been more strong on this issue than the senior senator from the state of New Jersey, Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Look, this country has a gun violence problem. It has a mass shooting problem. It has a suicide problem. And now it has a do-it-yourself downloadable guns that will supercharge this crisis and lead to more senseless tragedies. It's already too easy for criminals and extremists and terrorists to get their hands on guns, and now we add a new concern, terrorists packing the plans for plastic printable firearms. I don't care if a gun is made out of metal, it's made out of plastic. If it can fire a bullet and take someone's life, then it needs to be regulated. And it's beyond irresponsible for the Trump administration to roll over and allow a self-described anarchist to post directions for do-it-yourself guns on a website available to anyone with an internet connection. Now, Republicans say they want to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, yet with this settlement, violent criminals can manufacture firearms. And not just any firearm, an untraceable firearm, making it much more difficult for law enforcement. Already, according to news reports, the blueprints for an AR-15, the weapon used in the massacre at Parkland, were downloaded more than 2,500 times. That's 2,500 untraceable, unregulated, high-powered weapons in the hands of 2,500 unknown individuals. As a ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I was appalled to find out that the State Department carried this out without notifying Congress. Last Wednesday, Secretary Pompeo looked at the committee in the eye and told us he was unaware of this issue, but that he would look into it. By Friday, the State Department had suspended arms export regulations specifically to allow these 3D gun blueprints to be posted on the Internet. So much for looking into the question. And in this morning's tweet, as the leader said, President Trump made clear that instead of listening to the concerns of the American people, when he has a gun question, he listens to the NRA. Now, the NRA isn't worried about our safety. They're worried that these plastic guns will hurt their bottom line and gun manufacturers and dealers that they represent. The posting of 3D gun plans just show how dangerous the Trump administration's regulatory effort to loosen export controls on firearms, including assault-style rifles and even sniper rifles, actually is to the safety of Americans at home and innocent civilians abroad. All you have to do is go to this company's website to see what they say. They're proclaiming, quote, the era of the downloadable gun is here. These two pieces of legislation are common sense. They're urgently needed. This isn't about politics. It's about public safety. It's about protecting innocent people. Excuse me, just one moment. Quiero decir que la construcción, permitir armas plásticas de 3 dimensiones que cualquier persona puede hacer en el Internet es un riesgo a la seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos, un riesgo en el mundo, una habilidad de terroristas actualmente tener acceso a armas que no deben tener, y es inconcebible que actualmente la administración ha permitido esto de proceder, que pone en riesgo la vida de personas en este país y de inocentes en otras partes del mundo, sin poder detectarlo, sin poder averiguar quién es el que es el dueño. Eso es inaceptable. Thank you.
Es un problema muy grande. Okay, now, Josh, and then Hannah, and then Nick. Josh? And introduce your organization as well.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Josh Scharf. I am an attorney with the Brady Campaign and Center to Prevent Gun Violence. We were very surprised and we were very disturbed when we learned that the State Department and the Justice Department had reversed course and suddenly decided to settle their case with Defense Distributed, particularly after the government had won at each and every phase and stage of the litigation. We were especially disturbed when we learned that the settlement was done in a manner that would be a risk to the national security, and that it would allow individuals to get their hands on untraceable 3D printed guns and cause harm to Americans both abroad and at home. The issue of untraceable 3D printed guns has been an issue of much concern to my organization for quite some time. More than 2 years ago, we filed a brief in the State Department's case with Defense Distributed in support of the government's original position, the correct position, that untraceable 3D printed guns are a threat to the national security, and curbing the spread of such guns is not a violation of the Second Amendment. When the State Department abdicated its role in defending the national security by keeping terrorists from getting their hands on untraceable 3D printed guns, an issue that should not be controversial, we, along with our friends at Everytown and Giffords, attempted to stand in the government's shoes and keep the case alive. We were disappointed that the court did not allow us to do so on procedural grounds, but we've been encouraged that our efforts have inspired other efforts around the country to keep this from happening, including efforts of state attorney generals and legislative efforts such as the great efforts that you've heard about today. We are committed to stopping the spread of untraceable 3D printed guns. We look forward to working with our partners at Everytown and Giffords in the future, as well as with policymakers and with the American public, to keep everyone safe from this threat. And yes, untraceable 3D printed guns are a great threat to the American public, and we look forward to continuing the fight to stop them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hannah Scherer. If you want to sit down, there are some.
I'm Hannah Scherer from Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. The Trump administration's decision to settle with Defense Distributed and allow them to post code for downloadable guns was short-sighted and incredibly reckless. The settlement creates grave dangers in the near term, like that determined killers or terrorists will be able to smuggle plastic guns through metal detectors, or that dangerous people who can't pass a background check will be able to make their own guns and perpetrate mass shootings and other crimes. And then there are the long-term dangers. Over the next 5 to 10 years, untraceable firearms without serial numbers are likely to multiply and be used to commit many more crimes down the road. There are 3 main reasons why these downloadable guns pose a critical safety threat. First, it'll be possible for people who are prohibited from possessing guns to download and print their own. Second, 3D printed guns don't have serial numbers, so can't be traced by law enforcement after they're used in crimes. And finally, these plastic guns are often undetectable by metal detectors at airports, government buildings, and other sensitive locations. While instructions for 3D printed firearms have been posted on dark corners of the internet before, this will be the first time they've been published with express federal approval, setting a dangerous precedent and placing lives at risk. The Trump administration bears responsibility for the reckless dereliction of duty that went into the decision to settle a lawsuit it had been winning until this point. We applaud the important work of Senators Blumenthal and Nelson and Representatives Cicilline and Moulton for taking action and introducing legislation that would make it illegal to possess these untraceable firearms or post instructions for 3D printing of guns. Congress should consider these bills immediately. State attorneys general and other law enforcement leaders are also pursuing important legal remedies against the administration to try to limit the fallout from this dangerous settlement. The bottom line is this: we need to do whatever we can to stop this reckless and dangerous policy before it's too late. Thank you.
Nick Suplina.
Thank you. Good morning. And thank you, Senators Schumer, Markey, Blumenthal, and Menendez for inviting me here today. We appreciate your strong leadership, which is needed now more than ever. I'm Nick Suplina. I'm Managing Director for Law and Policy at Everytown for Gun Safety. And I'm here today because the State Department has taken a dangerous, reckless turn by allowing blueprints for do-it-yourself, downloadable guns to be posted online by someone whose stated purpose is to undermine federal and state gun laws. The State Department ignored the warnings of law enforcement, veterans, and more than 100,000 Everytown and Moms Demand Action supporters who called on them to take action to protect Americans at home and abroad. They did not. The downloadable guns made available by the State Department's decision are a danger to public safety. This decision will allow dangerous felons, drug cartels, terrorists to bypass criminal background checks and print their own firearms with nothing more than an internet connection and a readily accessible 3D printer. I commended the senators here today for standing up for us. Everytown's proud to support the common sense legislation they're introducing to stop this dangerous development and to keep our communities safe from downloadable guns. We've also seen an outpouring of support of the common sense legislation they are introducing from people across the country, and action taken by attorneys general across the country as well as local lawmakers. 21 attorneys general sent a letter calling on the Trump administration to change course, and another 9 are now suing in Washington State federal court. But the fight for downloadable guns is far from over. We stand with our allies, including friends at Giffords and Brady, to fight tooth and nail to stop this scourge before it gets started. We don't have a moment to waste. The time to stop this deadly technology is now. Thank you.
Questions from the press? Yes, sir.
Senator Nelson, can you talk a little bit about the bills themselves? What kind of language is in there? What you would hope that they would actually address? Is it more about the punishments that would come from something like this, or what would the 2 bills specifically say?
As I stated in my remarks, we hope we don't have to resort to the legislation because the clock is ticking and it's less than 24 hours now. But if that's necessary, we'll push to have the legislation that says the obvious. You can't push online blueprints of weapons. The other piece of legislation was and has been and is now being expanded that any gun has to have a metal part that is essential to the gun. The problem in the past is what they do is they make it a detachable part so that it can still not be detected. That legislation would say that it had to have that not only for detection but also for the serial number. That's basically the legislation.
It has to be traceable. That's it. Ban guns that are not traceable or detectable.
What has been the response from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle?
Any of you all? Crickets.
So far, no response. I think they are really in a quandary about what to do because there is such a lack of leadership on the Republican side. The president has weighed in for the first time now, ambiguously, kowtowing to the NRA again. And as Senator Markey said so well, the NRA has to be made not relevant anymore. But at the end of the day, these downloadable plastic weapons are no good for the American gun industry. They don't create jobs. They don't lead to employment. And I don't think that most hunters or recreationalists want these downloadable plastic guns proliferating on the streets and giving them a bad name too. So my hope is that there will be an outpouring that will sway our Republican colleagues to do the right thing. But so far, no response.
Remember, my state legislature, in response to the Parkland shooting, did a whole array of things, including the hardening of schools, as well as arming teachers. So if the whole idea that you can defeat the system, that the shooter gets in there, even the NRA's suggested addition of selling more guns by arming teachers, that's just simply not going to work. And that's why this whole thing is turned upside down, and it just does not make sense.
Some of these blueprints are already out there on the internet. How do you propagate that model, given that this is already out there?
We just have to stop it where it is. We can't allow it to proliferate. We can't allow them up on legal websites for eternity. It's already bad enough. We have to stop it from becoming an epidemic. That's what will happen if it's legal to put these blueprints up for everyone. Not just in the United States, by the way. The internet is global. This is every city and town across the whole world that will have access to this. Every bad person, every terrorist. And so we have to just stop it now. As bad as it is already, as the fact that it's already been in some dark parts of the internet, this just makes it Googleable. This makes it eBay, Hulu, YouTube. This just makes it another website, okay? We shut it down now. We've prevented 99% of the potential damage.
Sí. His question is just to talk about your legislation. So, simplemente la legislación del senador Blumenthal y Nelson es muy claro. No puede haber una arma que no es registrable y que no es detectable. Esa es la esencia. La realidad de esta tecnología de 3 dimensiones de poder crear una arma plástica no es detectable y no es registrable. Y de esa forma puede cualquier persona tener una arma sin saber quién es la persona, si tiene un delito criminal, si tiene un delito de salud mental, si actualmente tiene una enfermedad que actualmente no le debe permitir una licencia bajo el recurso normal. Así que la legislación de ellos nos asegura de que actualmente podemos ser protegidos, no solamente aquí, pero en el mundo. Porque como se ha dicho el senador Markey, la realidad es con el Internet, este tipo de diseño plástico puede crear armas en cualquier parte del mundo con cualquier terrorista yendo contra los propios soldados dentro del mundo. Por eso queremos pararlo ahora.
You know, we have come together in a bipartisan way on a fixed NICS bill that improved the background check system. Forget about the background check system as a means to stop gun violence if we have untraceable and undetectable weapons. because there's no way to prevent convicted felons from downloading these weapons. Forget about TSA as a means to protect our nation. There's been bipartisan support for those anti-terrorism programs. The United States of America will be the biggest exporter of terror if we fail to stop these ghost guns. And as Senator Markey has said so well, it's our troops in the field who will be in danger from those terrorists, who will be able to download them as easily as somebody in the United States. The world will be a lot less safe.
You know, the NRA says that there's a First Amendment right to post on the internet. It's free speech. Well, there are limits on the First Amendment. You cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. There's a limitation. You can't do that if there is no fire. But as Senator Blumenthal said, this First Amendment right that they're seeking to exercise will allow plastic guns to be brought into that theater. And there should be no right to be able to do that as well under the First Amendment. It is absolutely antithetical. There are limitations on First Amendment rights, on Second Amendment rights, and we are going to fight with this legislation to ensure that every member of the Senate has to vote on that issue.
But have you reached out to Republicans? Because after Parkland, we saw Republican governors in Vermont, Florida, and Nevada sign legislation to combat things like this. Have you physically reached out to your Republican colleagues?
We've begun reaching out. You know, I'm hopeful and optimistic. I won't say confident, but now is the moment to lead. Our Republicans can lead. And the failure to step forward and their silence will speak volumes to the American people. You know, 95% of the American people want background checks on every gun sale. The overwhelming numbers of the American people want common sense, sensible gun measure. The moms of America want better protection, and they demand action. This measure will take us back before the prohibition of felons having guns. It will eviscerate every single bipartisan measure that has passed. And that's why our Republican colleagues have an obligation to step forward. And, you know, here's the elephant in the room. It will take time to pass legislation. And in the meantime, there will be a new wave of gun violence in America that is directly the fault of the President, Donald Trump, his administration, and our Republican colleagues. And it will be an election issue this November.
Can I just join you in that answer?
Were you guys surprised by this settlement? It seems like you had no idea this was coming.
It was totally a surprise. It was totally flabbergasting because, as Josh indicated so well, the administrations, the past and the present, were winning at every turn. This litigation was on a path, in fact, a glide path to victory. And the administration basically just surrendered. It seized defeat from the jaws of victory. It's inexplicable and unjustifiable.
Can I just join the previous very briefly? One is that, as it relates to your question, in the Foreign Relations Committee, we got no notice from the Secretary of State, no notice whatsoever, which I believe under the law he had to give us a notice, and we're pursuing that. Secondly, as it relates to the previous question about Republicans, look, I'm sure that Senator Blumenthal and Senator Nelson would welcome, as we would all, every one of our colleagues to join us. But I have to be honest with you, every reasonable gun safety measure that we have tried to advance has not seen the light of day because they just simply won't even give us a vote. Either here in the Senate or in the House of Representatives, they won't give us a vote. So we have to find unique ways to try to introduce an opportunity to get a vote here. But the reality is while we're waiting to fight them instead of having them join us on behalf of the American people so we can have a vote and move forward on the process, they have the power, as Senator Blumenthal said, to stop right now. We asked the Secretary of State, reconsider your decision, which would have put a freeze on this and would have let the litigation continue to go, which was moving in the right direction on behalf of every American in this country. Now, I don't know what the dynamics were, why the Secretary of State suddenly turned it around, and he decided to have a settlement that's not in the interest of the American people. So, yes, we'd like to have Republicans join us, but the reality is when you have the White House, when you have the House, when you have the Senate, you could stop this right now by executive decision.
Cheryl?
Okay. Sorry that I arrived late. This was probably already asked, but I'm sure you saw the president's tweet where he said, already spoke to NRA, doesn't seem to make much sense. What is your message to the president?
Our message to the president is, yeah, it makes no sense. Why did you do it? This surrender is your doing. Now undo it. And right now. That's simple.
President Trump keeps saying that he's the guy who has to fix everything wrong with our country. Well, he's saying that there's something wrong with this policy, so he should fix it before midnight tonight. The ball's in his court. He has a chance to prevent this from happening. Donald Trump will be totally responsible for every downloadable plastic AR-15 that will be roaming the streets of our country if he does not act today. Because beginning tonight at 12:01 a.m., bad people can go to Instagram and get an Insta-gun that's plastic and non-detectable and without a serial number. That's what's about to happen. The president is tweeting about it. Now it's time for the president to do something about it and to do it today.
You know, I suggested facetiously, I should emphasize facetiously before you came in, that he can blame it on the Attorney General. He can blame it on anyone if he wants to save face, but it's his doing, it's his responsibility, and the blood's going to be on his hands. It's that simple and stark. And he can tweet from now until the end of his administration. But the hard reality is that he can stop needless death and injury in America. And he takes an oath of office. If he wants to fulfill that oath, he'll ban these guns.
To paraphrase Harry Truman, plastic downloadable gun stops at Donald Trump's desk. And he has a chance to act today. He has a moral responsibility to do that for the safety of children all across America. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks for coming. Good job.
Excellent. Thank you, Mom. Yeah, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.